So, hey everyone, I am sitting here today with Jillian Penhale. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Yeah, right. Cool. So, actually, Jillian and I have been friends for quite a number of years now, and we've done ministry alongside each other, and we've lived next to each other, and it's been quite the experience. So, I thought it would be really cool to bring her in to share a little bit about herself and about what she's doing with Created in these new days, because it's been such a wild last few years, and also to share about herself, her family, and, you know, what they're up to. So, Jillian, would you kindly give us a little, the speech that you give to people when you meet them about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jillian Penhale, and I am the director at Created, which Created is a nonprofit that works with women coming out of trafficking and sexual exploitation in Tampa. And I've been the director there. In September, it will be 7 years.
Wow.
Actually, I started on the staff 7 years ago. I've been the director about 6 years. So that's crazy because it feels like maybe like just yesterday, I feel like sometimes. So we do that work in a lot of different ways. I think what I always like to tell people is, like, Created, at the end of the day, we're just like a community of women that's trying to create a place of belonging for these women that have been exploited and abused throughout our city. So the main ways that we do that is, one, through outreach programs, in which we now call like our emergency response side of our organization. So we run a drop-in center on Nebraska Avenue, and women can come in and get toiletries, support, clothing, and meet with one of our staff team members or a volunteer. And then from there, we can offer housing options. We can help them get into detox. We can help them get into mental health, really whatever that emergency response is needed. So we have 2 different safe housing programs that the women can live in for up to 90 days as they try to figure out what does the next step look like. And then we also, of course, offer longer term housing, which women can live in for up to 2 years, as they just go through the steps of recovery, go through life skills, job skills, figuring out healing and what that looks like in the future. And so that's really what Created does. And then, like I said, I've been with Created for 7 years. And I think for me, what brought me to Created was really, at the time, so I have my background is in the nonprofit world. I worked for a larger nonprofit for to Created, and I had my master's in nonprofit management. And so I think through that, I learned, like, I want to be somewhere where, like, you want to be able to be doing all the things. Like, I don't want to be in a bureaucratic environment. So that's something I was looking for. And then on the other side, like maybe the more intentional side, I've just always been really passionate about women's issues and feeling like, and when I learned about sexual exploitation in the context of Tampa. So for those who don't know, Tampa is 3rd in the nation for the number of women who are brought into the U.S. for the purposes of sexual trafficking. And then we also, people say that we have more strip clubs per capita than any other city in the U.S. And then there was a study done actually only about 2 years ago by the Polaris Project, where we're 3rd in the nation for the amount of illicit massage parlors in a city. So it's definitely a huge thing happening in Tampa. And I think when I started to learn about that, and just knowing that women are being treated as commodities, like that's what brought me to Created, of just like wanting to do something about that and wanting to see like how we could create change. And I think I went into it with the mentality of like, how can we fix this problem? And then very quickly learned, like, okay, you know what? Like, at the end of the day, these women need the same things that I need, which is just a place of belonging. So it's really Created as more of a community than anything else. Yeah. We're just creating belonging. And yeah, of course we have programs that are helping people, and we're like making those steps, but it's like at the end of the day, they just need the same things that everybody needs. And so I think that's what I've learned the most through Created, is just like, you know, we're all in the need of the same love and belonging. And of course we are a faith-based organization, and, you know, just the opportunity to meet God and like let him heal like what's happened. Yeah.
I think, you know, what a great realization when you come to the point where you realize that it's just about belonging, which we all need, which I think, you know, the brokenness that's in people often looks different. And so, the workaholic that is, never home 80 hours a week, who, on the surface has a beautiful home and money in the bank. So people think he has it together, or she has it together. And rather, it's just a sense of running from the pain that they feel inside of them, because they don't feel like they belong. So they feel like they need to earn their belonging, and they do it through work or whatever it might be. But the brokenness that's in each one of us often is shown through our lack of belonging.
Yeah.
And that realization that, that's all people need. When I, doing the Timothy initiative with, broken men coming together to do life together in community, is a lot easier than we need to fix everybody. Because, generally speaking, people don't need to be fixed. They just need a better way of living. So that's awesome. It's beautifully said. How long has Created been around now?
So Created's been in Tampa for 13 years.
Yeah.
And it really just started as an outreach ministry. So the first thing that Created ever did was just street outreach. So going out to women that are in street prostitution and offering them gifts. And then the thing I love about the story of Created, which I mean is similar to Timothy Initiative and other things, is like everything that any way that we've grown has come out of the next needs of the women. So it's like it's just being able to hear and see what the need is, and then kind of growing from there. And that's one thing I love, because it's not like we're trying to create, we're not just creating programs. Like there's actual voices and people behind everything that we do.
Let me ask you this. You know this, and maybe most people don't, but donors like programs.
Yes.
Because it's nice and tidy. It's
statistics, yes.
Yes, metrics, statistics. And it's just so, I don't want to say annoying, but it's annoying because it's like, often doesn't even have anything to do with the people we're trying to serve. It just looks on paper like it's doing something. So how do you juggle that with your donors?
That's a really good question. So I think, I think as a director, like I've struggled with that of like, because you want to like give people the information that they're seeking. And it's also like, you want them to feel confident that you're doing the work, because we know, like our team, like we know that we are working ourselves to death trying to, cultivate this space for women. But yeah, I think for me, so one of the things that happened, actually the previous director of Created, Keisha Polonio, so she and I and our team at the time sat down and we came up with these metrics of, what are the things that at the end of the day, we want to be able to say like this happened at Created. And so we kind of share that concept with our donors. It doesn't make sense to everyone, but we do. And so one is, so our three metrics are like, did she meet Jesus while she was here? Like, did she encounter God in some way? Did she leave the sex industry? And then 3, did she go and make disciples? And so that's something that we even use on our own staff teaming, like because we're working in a recovery space, obviously relapse happens. And so even when we're debriefing that, we can ask ourselves those questions and say, like, did these things happen? Yeah. So that's helpful to me because I think it keeps me grounded when I'm in the world of like statistics. And then of course, I mean, like, because it's not hard for us to record how many people walk into our drop-in center, how many people get a bed. But I think more than anything, I try to cultivate story to be able to tell our donors. And it's like, okay, you might want to hear a number, but actually let me just tell you this one story that happened. Of course, respecting privacy of any of the women, but so we use story a lot. And that's something that I've learned through just different coaches and stuff with fundraising. It's just telling stories is really going to make the most impact anyway. Like people think they just want to hear like the big numbers, but also with Created. And I mean, I'm sure especially in the recovery space, like you're not going to get insane numbers because the reality is you're building trust with people that have been so broken down and like so just misused. And so they don't trust anybody. So even within our drop-in center, the statistic is that it takes 7 to 8 times for someone to even come through the door before they even start to talk to our team.
Wow.
So it's not, and I think the perception of the outside community when they hear about human trafficking is like, well, of course, all the women just are banging on your door trying to get out.
Yeah.
No, like it's psychological manipulation. Like they're not doing that because like they're stuck and they have to figure out how they have to be able to make that choice in some way. And so it's a lot of, so we kind of share those stories as a way of like try to explain, like, you're not going to see crazy numbers from Created because it takes time. And even once somebody comes into our house, like one of the questions we always get that makes me struggle is people ask, well, what's your graduation rate?
Oh my goodness, I hit that one.
And I'm like, maybe 1 or 2 people a year, because what they're not seeing is it's multiple times that they're coming in. So it could be over 4 years that like they come in and they come out, but then it finally sticks. And now maybe they have 2 years clean. It's like, it's about a person. And so those people, so no, it's not going to be like, oh yeah, we had 15 graduations this year. It's like, no, we had maybe 2, but maybe 20 women came into the sanctuary, and they're all in their process. And so I think it's hard to explain like recovery and healing, and especially in healing from deep trauma, is a process. Yeah. And it's not pretty. Right.
No, not at all. And as a matter of fact, a few years back, I finally had to create a graduation ceremony just because I'm doing this simply because we need to get funding. Yeah. And we don't have a graduation because it's life on life. It's recovery. So that means it's the rest of your life. Yeah. So what are you graduating from, really? So we literally created a graduation just because that's what people will give to. Yeah. Yeah. And which is, it's sometimes it feels like you got to jump through hoops in order to get the results that you need to get. And you play the game and hopefully play it well. And I have to say, you've played it much better than I have. I've always been like, I don't know. How does Created raise money? I don't know. We don't raise any. We just suck at this. So it's.
Well, I do. I think what I've learned is really story. Yeah. Story.
So tell me a recent story. I honestly, for so many years, I was directly, connected with Created, and I should be now still because it's very close to me proximity wise, but I don't know any recent stories.
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell one from so in the beginning, so I mentioned Created's been around for 13 years. In the beginning, so we were a street outreach, and then the first thing we opened was the long-term home, the sanctuary. So it started as a 1-year program. Now women can live there for up to 2 years. And for probably the first 7 to 8 years of Created story, like those were the 2 main things that we did. And so now in the last 4 years, we've added in our safe housing programs, which is shorter term housing, and then our drop-in center. So I'll tell them from the drop-in center because that's our newest program. Yeah. And something that happened during COVID is that we were able to get some grant funding because at that time, I think if you remember back to the beginning of coronavirus, everyone was so worried that it was going to be rampant through the homeless community, which did not end up happening. Nope. Because they're not traveling anywhere. So that everyone thought that it was going to be rampant. So like they're so worried about like the women that are out on the street. And so the city and the county had put these programs together where nonprofits could put people in extended stay hotels. Yeah. And so we were able to get some of that funding. I mean, we only got 10 beds. Like other nonprofits had like 100 beds. We got 10 though. So we were really happy with that. And so we were able to start like immediately. Like if someone came into the drop-in center, we'd be like, hey, do you want a bed tonight? And put them in immediately, as long as they passed a drug screen and didn't have any like current mental health concerns. So, which that's pretty much our only, if you're wondering like, well, what does it take for somebody to get into Created? That's really the only thing. Like to be able to sleep in a bed, you have to be able to pass a drug screen. If you don't, we'll get you into detox and then you'll get the bed after that. But,
this is true. I've actually put people in there that had mental health issues and it didn't work out so well.
Yeah. But, and we try to get them mental health help, but it just depends on their willingness. And so, so we were able to start that. And honestly, going into that, we were super worried because we were like, what is it going to look like to put someone that's been exploited throughout the city into a hotel? Like, is that going to be a good environment for them? Yeah. How is that going to work? And we actually learned that it does work. And so we've been able to keep funding for that program going. And so we still have that now. So we can put women in hotels. We try to keep it only for 5 days because within that 5 days, we kind of know, like, are they really ready to pursue this? And if they're not, then we can just like help them exit into something safe or semi-safe or really what they want. And if they are ready, then we can put them into some of our longer programs or get them into another program in the city. So at our drop-in center, we actually opened it February of 2020, right before the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So we've been running, if you're familiar with Created, it's the clothing boutique that's on Nebraska. We've been running a clothing boutique for the 8 years that we've been on that property. And even 8 years ago, we started realizing that the majority of people that were coming in were women who were looking for services. And then especially once they realized that it was Created, they were coming in and asking questions. So we've always had that. So the women who we employ in the boutique have always given out gift bags, always make sure we're giving out resources. But I think about 2.5 years ago, we were like, man, this could actually be such an intentional outreach, and we're not utilizing it. So that's when we transferred it over to a drop-in center. And so in the drop-in center, like I mentioned, women can come in and we offer toiletries, clothing, and then they can do support. We're trying to add in more classes and things like that they can partake in. But I'll tell a story of one girl who came in. And so I'll just call her Ashley for now. Because people probably would know her if you work around this area. So she has been coming in our drop-in center since we opened weekly. She actually is someone that we've been serving on street outreach for a long time. She grew up in the foster care system, and her mom was working in prostitution and being trafficked. And so she would always run from her foster home and go look for her mom. So that's how she also ended up in the same situation. And a lot of people don't realize, when I talk about street prostitution, the average age of entry into prostitution is 13 years old. Right. So when you are passing women on Nebraska and you think, oh, they're choosing to be out here, it's what really is choice? Yeah. When it started that age. And also most of those women actually do have a pimp and they do have a trafficker, from the stories that we know. And so she comes in pretty regularly. She does have somebody that she's working for, and sometimes he'll stand on the corner, outside of our drop-in center, because we don't allow men in our drop-in center.
That's probably good.
Because it creates a safe space. Yeah. Because we actually we've had maybe 3 or 4 times now that a woman actually runs in trying to get away from somebody, and we have a protocol where we just go into lockdown and put her into the house and then close everything down until we can exit her into safe housing. But with this girl, Ashley, she comes in pretty regularly, and for a while, and of course, and she struggles with substance abuse. So she'll come in in all sorts of ways. But she's one of the first ones too, that, when she was coming in so often, one of our women who work in the boutique was like, man, don't you feel like she's taking advantage because she's just getting new clothes every day? And I was like, well, why don't you ask her, why do you need new clothes every day? And she told them, well, I run every night. Once I get picked up, I run from the motel, because if I stay, I could die. Yeah. So I run and I leave whatever I have. And so I just come here the next morning and I get a change of clothes, because she'll just change right there and then go back out. And so we've known her for a long time, and we've always offered emergency housing. She's always been like, yeah, whatever. So at Thanksgiving, we did a meal, and she came that day, and she had probably 3 or 4 plates of food and just kept eating. And while she was eating, our team was sitting there, and she was just like, man, I'm ready today. And we're like, well, what does that mean? What are you ready for? And she was like, I'm going to take a bed tonight. And we were like, okay. Yeah. So so our team just got her bed, figured it out. And as our case manager was driving her out to where she was going to be staying for safe housing, she told this story where she was like, man, my mind is she was just telling her man, my mind is being blown right now. And the case manager's like, about what? And she was like, she called him her boyfriend, but it's his pimp, and he has 4 girls. And he was like, we've all been so happy, think that he loves us so much because he got us pallets that we've been sleeping on in the street. And so there's this little area near Created where they've been sleeping on pallets on the street. And she was like, and I felt so loved because of this pallet, but now I'm actually going to a bed. Yeah. And my mind is just racing because man, I really am she was just basically trying to explain man, I really am being tricked, that I think that this is so great, but I could actually live a normal life, or I could actually live in a bed, or I could sleep in a bed. And so that's just one story from a drop-in center. So and that also shows how our programs work together. We're offering outreach, but it's we also have a follow-up. But it's but you can also get a bed.
Yeah.
and you can have somewhere to sleep. And then if that works out, you can move into longer term care. So from our safe housing programs, women kind of take two routes, where one is we help them get into something like our 2-year program, or we help them get into inpatient treatment somewhere in the city if that's what they need. Or we also have women who they just really need to stabilize, get a job, and then get independent housing. So we kind of have everyone do both of those options. Yeah.
Well, and you, when I first was introduced to Created, it was right in the very beginning. It was, right at the 13 years, and no one was doing anything like this.
Right. Yeah.
So, for years it was like that. It was like, I'd mention Created, and people would be like, "What?" But there seems to be more people entering the game now of helping in this area. Is that the case? And is there anybody that is doing something similar to you?
Yeah, there is. I think I always say that too. 13 years ago when Created started, it was really on the forefront of what people call the anti-trafficking movement. And even the founding team of Created, they didn't really even understand human trafficking as much,
Right.
They felt man, yeah, women are being sold on our streets, and we want to do something about it. And then as they met the women and heard the stories, they realized, oh, they're also victims of trafficking. It's so interesting how we grew with that, but then around us, this anti-trafficking movement also started. And so there are throughout the city, there are multiple churches that have teams that go out and do different outreaches in the city. So particularly going into strip clubs and offering gifts is a really popular one. There are a couple housing programs similar to Created that have started housing women who have been trafficked. But we're the only one currently open in Hillsborough County. And also we're the only one that serves women of all ages. So a lot of them, they operate off of grant funding, and that limits the age range that they can serve. For some reason, a lot of the grants only want to serve women from 18 to 25.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know why, but and so we're the only one that will serve women of all ages, because the reality is when we're working with them on the street, it's people always assume that we're working with younger women, but we have women that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s that their story is that story of this started when I was 13 years old. So it's 50 years on the street. That is so much trauma to work through. And so there are, and I think the other good thing too is there's also been, because I always say Created's really good at doing the on the ground grassroots stuff, but we're not great at the advocacy part of it. So there's also so many advocacy organizations that have started that are
good.
Working on changing laws and working on educating everyone in the city. That's not really our strong point, but we love working with all the organizations that do that. Yeah.
It's good. You have many pieces to fill it, because the advocacy part, you can't do everything and do it all well.
Yeah. Agree.
So what would you say is the number one challenge you face trying to help the women? Would it be the men in their lives? Would it be the donors that don't give? What would it be?
Yeah, I think it's probably so in two different ways. So I think organizationally, our biggest challenge is, one, it is funding, but then also bed space, because the need is more than we usually have beds for. And then for the women specifically, the biggest challenge is that there's no quick fixes to the trauma and the addiction part. There's no quick fixes. It's a long game. And I think that's what also is also so hard for everyone outside of Created to understand. So it kind of goes back to even the statistics question. It's it's a long journey that these women are entering into. And so for us, it's trying to make sure we have that support service. But the biggest issue that we consistently see is that, we can, while they're in our housing and while they kind of have that community support, it's they can keep it going, but it is the relationships with men and knowing how to find a safe partner and knowing and not being lured back in to these unhealthy relationships with men is the biggest long-term challenge that we face, because there's just it's personal choice at the end of the day, and there's
Right.
nothing we can, and it's like there's not a lot we can do about it. I mean, we can educate about it, but that's always, I feel like for us, when we have, that's probably the most common thing that we see when women relapse or go back out, which is what we say when they go back into prostitution, would be that like they've entered back into some unhealthy relationship, which I mean, it's common across the addiction community that like relationships lead to that a lot. Yeah. But yeah, that I think like the actual like long-term healing, that's the biggest challenge, is like healthy relationships and how to cultivate those. But organizationally, definitely funding, definitely just like, you know, we're still a pretty small team. And so it's like it's like, especially when we're adding in programs, it's like, I also think like always scaling right and like knowing like what to add next and what to do next. Which you need funding to add things. So I can think of like 100 things that we could start doing, but it's like knowing what's next and then how to make that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that's the challenge. It's like, how do you balance, you know, limited resources and big ideas?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and an insurmountable problem that's staring at you. It is, because if you put too much effort of the limited resources that you have into the wrong program, it really ends up backfiring for a long period of time. Yeah.
And that's even within Create's history. And not that I would say that it was the wrong choice, but for so long, we only had this sanctuary program, which is limited in its capacity. And so we put so much effort into that other than our outreach programs. And now I feel like we're kind of turning that, because by actually adding more staff to be able to take on the outreach side of it, we've been able to increase our impact.
Yeah.
Because in the sanctuary home, we can only house 9 women. Like that's it at the end of the day. But through our outreaches and through the drop-in and emergency housing, it's like we've been able to, like, we now serve 89 women a week through our programs. And so, but that's only through like pivoting and saying like, okay, like this program's good. We know we need this number of staff here, but like what else needs to be happening in the city to like be able to impact the most women? And I think that's where my heart is always is like, okay, we know that there's countless women that we haven't met yet. So what are we doing to meet the next woman that needs to know that there's an option, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's a really great way to look at it. How are when the women first come in, they've had this severe trauma, you know, childhood into their adults. How are they with receiving Jesus?
It definitely varies. I would say, so one thing that we always say too is like, which I'm sure most people are not, but we are definitely not forceful in our like approach of trying to get them to encounter Jesus. And even in our intake, like when they're applying to come in our programs, we make sure they know like this is a faith-based organization. So, you know, there will be times where people are doing prayers. There will be times where we're doing Bible study. People will go and attend church, but we're never going to force you to do it.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing, is like it has to be like one of our core values is empowerment, because they have to be empowered to make that choice themselves. And also, which I think with Created, again, like if you think back at the trauma that they've endured, being like performative is like really common. And so like there's a lot of times when women come into our program, they're like, oh, you're faith-based, you want me to pretend to be a Christian? Okay, I'll pretend to be a Christian, and like that's what I'll do, and I'll get by and whatever, because they're trying to be what they think we want them to be. And so that's a constant conversation that we have to break down. And then a lot of our women do have abuse that happened in the church, and they also have pastors that have been their abusers or been their Johns. And so there's just already coming in just a mistrust of church for a lot of the women. But at the same time, I feel like they're very open because they're all seeking something. And they're all seeking like to know that there's like a purpose that can come out of what's happened. And so I think like for us, it's like that's what we're taking them towards. And so like we actually find that they're really pretty open, but I think for our staff, it's like we worry more about like making sure we're careful in how we're presenting it, so they don't feel like you have to do this, like you have to be this person. But I do find that like a lot of the women, like they're just seeking they're seeking understanding. And I think once they start encountering Jesus, it starts and they start to feel at least some peace or something.
Yeah.
It makes the whole healing. I feel like that really starts a lot of the healing process for them. So yeah, I find that most of them are pretty open. But again, it's like we always have to contradict that of like, but are they like pretending or is it true? And I hopefully we can get the women feel like they can be honest with us about that. But that's definitely a concern that we have. And it is something that as creative, like we don't ever force it. Like they don't, like on Sundays, like we want them to find a church home, but they have to attend either attend a recovery group or a church, you know? So it's like we're trying to make sure that it's an option always.
This is just off the path of the questions I had, but this past year and a half, the political nature of this world went freaking bananas. Crazy, outright ludicrous. So Christianity at the center of it all. And, the big divide that's happened. Did that go into created as in, it gave a lot of the people that we work with or I work with or my own personal beliefs a lot of reasons to not trust the church.
Yeah.
So how did it impact you? Yeah,
I think the biggest impact through all the political thing for us was, if you remember, all the QAnon conspiracies were very centered on human trafficking. And it's just, I think the biggest challenge that I had was, human trafficking is already horrific. Like, you don't have to, like, these stories don't make it, like, it's just, you don't have to make up things to make it horrific. It's already bad. It's already horrific, Why lie? Why lie? And then it's also that the stories that are being told are not actually the experiences. And so I feel like I think the biggest frustration is through these, theories, that were being put out, that it was really telling the story of like people being kidnapped and then taken somewhere and people people just walking through the mall and being kidnapped and approached by traffickers. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Or hasn't. But I am saying that I think actually a friend of mine who runs an organization that works with minors, we were at an event together and she said something along the lines of like, that can happen, but 99.5% of the victims that we work with, it was a relative or someone that they know that they began abusing them and then trafficking them. So it's like, for me, it's more of like, I think the biggest impact of Created was like, okay, how do we tell the truth about this? Because it's like, yeah, what you're saying, I guess it could happen. Like, I'm not saying like you don't want to be like, no, that could never happen, because anything can happen. Yeah. Right. But it's just like, I think the biggest challenge was like, how do we continue to advocate? Like, that's not the story here. That's not what happens in Tampa. Because for me, it's like, that gives everyone an out. That like, oh, it's only going to be kidnappers. Right. It's only going to be like, we're putting on this image that like traffickers are these like kidnappers that come in the night and steal children. No. I don't mean that, but it just sounded kind of It's just like, crazy. No, it's like for a lot of women, it was her boyfriend. Yeah. It was her father. It was her grandfather. And so it's like, for me, I think the biggest challenge became like, how do we continue to be honest about the stories that we see versus what's being portrayed. Right. And so that was hard. I think besides that, I think we didn't really have a lot of impact. And honestly, well, that's big enough. Yeah. I think besides that, like, our women probably are not very political because they're not paying attention to what's going on. Well, you actually, some do, but yeah. That was actually the part I was talking about. The QAnon so that was what it was. And it was hard because I think, for me, like, I always want to be very careful with what I'm saying because I don't want to, you don't ever want to like try to make somebody not want to be involved in your organization. Right. But at the end of the day, like, the truth that I have to tell is the truth of the women that we serve. Right. And that's what I am obligated to. I'm not obligated to everybody else's political beliefs, And so I think I always have to remind myself of that, of like, my job is to advocate for what the women need and what they experience and what is true. And just because you've heard this theory or you read this article or something like that doesn't make that true. Right. So that's been the hardest part. Yeah.
It's interesting how our minds are shaped by the information that is taken in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's reflecting reality at all.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of working on a book, and to really try to change the way the world looks at recovery around addiction, mental health, and suicidal thoughts, and most of it is trying to break these ideas that people have that are just simply not true, or certainly not the majority of experiences, such as person becomes an addict because they choose to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's absolutely 99.9 not true.
Yeah.
But people think that, and then therefore they don't want to help people because their whole reasoning is, well, they chose that. And so it's like, well, we have to look at the core of why something is the problem before we can build out the answer to how to, alleviate the problem. And a big area for me is trying to bring awareness to trauma. Yeah. So it's so, awesome that you brought that up many times so far, where there's, a new movement coming out there. It's like trying to make a more trauma-informed society. Yeah. Because until we understand trauma at a deeper level, until we understand that even trauma isn't necessarily somebody being kidnapped or, in a gunfight or all these major things that are certainly trauma, but the majority of trauma that actually affects people is a much subtler thing. The boyfriend that takes the woman, no, she wasn't kidnapped. It was the boyfriend who did it to her, and that trauma, that's still a trauma. So, and even by definition, trauma isn't, necessarily the event that happened. It's the way that the event is perceived within the individual. Yeah. And people perceive things differently. And we need to have a better understanding of that if we want to help those on the margins, if we want to help those that are certainly the most broken around us, and even if we want our own lives to be better, because there's probably trauma that's driving some of us that we don't even know about.
Yeah, I actually think a good example of that within the world of like trafficking and sexual exploitation, the most common outreach that we get questions about that. Well, I mean, like I already explained, we get the questions about street prostitution and women choosing to be there, but with strip clubs, because they're legal, people are always like, oh, well, all the story that I feel like is told to society is that these girls are in there because they're just paying off their college tuition. That's what I hear the most often from everyone else around me. An organization that's over in Kentucky did a research study in the clubs that they were going into, and they found that 96% of the women that were working in the clubs responded to a question saying that, yes, they were sexually abused as children. Yep. So trauma is impacting those decisions. So it's like, even if someone is doing it for money or it's been glamorized to them, so that they can, that's a way they can make money and pay off school, which, maybe is something that's happening. There's also a story behind that. And there's also that's not also what we see. It's not just 18-year-old girls paying off their college education. Right. We have women that have been working there for 15, 20 years, And so, but I think that's one of the common things we hear too, where it's like, oh, well, this is a choice. Right. Well, it's like, yeah, you can break it down to that, but there's reasons people make that choice, and that's the trauma.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to look at it. It's like, yeah, you can break it down to that. Of course, it was a choice. Yeah. Why did they feel that was the choice? And then is that even choice if they think that's the only option? Like I always say for the women that we're working with, like if they were taught from a very young age that their body is to be used for sex, what they don't have the option to make other choices because nobody's teaching them that it's not. Right. So then when they go and make that choice to work in a strip club, they're just doing what they've already been taught. So like, what is choice? Yeah. What is choice is something that is so deep that I don't think most people really want to spend the time to think it through. Yeah. And, that same, I don't know if it was the same, thing that was done out of Kentucky, but basically they've proven that of people that are in hardcore addiction. So all the people that go through trauma don't necessarily become addicts, but all people in hardcore addiction did go through trauma. So there is a correlation that is very one-to-one where, if you're an intravenous drug user, you went through childhood trauma. You may not even know it. You may not even realize it because a lot of it happened between, birth to 5 years old. So you may think, from 5 years old on, you were fine. And so it couldn't be that, but you don't realize what happened as an infant or as a small child because you've blocked it out of your own mind. And that leads people that are going into prostitution or addiction thinking that they must be evil, they must be bad.
It must be their fault.
Yeah, because my childhood was fine. It was like, meanwhile, you don't know about the babysitter that at a year and a half old, that what they did to you, or the different things that could have happened in your home between your parents, whatnot. And that is, so it's almost like, the biggest lie that keeps perpetuating itself throughout the individual's life. And it's such a sad thing. So let's get to you. How are you doing spiritually?
I'm good. That was fake. I'm good. It's hard. I mean, like, this work is hard. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things where it's like, for me, I think spiritually it's created. I was actually talking about this with one of my staff members yesterday. It's like, to work at Created, you will, and I think this would be true for anybody who works with like an actually marginalized population. It will test everything you think about faith in God, because you are encountering like death on a daily basis, like spiritual death on a daily basis. And if that doesn't make you rethink your entire relationship with the church and with God, then like you must just have like, I don't know, some
blinders on.
Yeah. So I'm like, so for me, it's like, I do feel like in the past 7 years, I've just been through like just major highs and major lows with like, just with God, of just like, I think in the beginning, it's of course the like, how does this happen on such a large scale? And then so getting to understand what actual free will is and what actually God allows, you know what I mean? It's like always those questions of like, and then learning how to explain that to the women is like such a process.
Sure.
Because they have those same questions of like, okay, like we talked about women being open to Jesus. Well, the most common question we get is like, yeah, sure, but God doesn't love me, because if he did, how did this happen? Right. And it's like, yeah, like that's a hard question. He does. People are just evil. Yeah. You know? And so, and he, so yeah, I think for me, it's just like definite highs and lows. And then at the same time, I feel like a lot of times in this work, you feel, and I'm sure again, I know this is true for a lot of people in ministry, but it's just like, there's so many times where you just feel so isolated, because it's like, I know for me, I think the biggest struggle in my faith has been like, why aren't other people like seeing this, and why don't they care? And so like, that's given me my own issues with like the church and stuff, which I think I'm healing from, but it's like, why, and so I think for me, in my faith, I think it's brought me to a place where it's like, I had to realize that my faith is just that, it's mine. And so like, I cultivate that with God myself. I can't depend on a church community or a pastor or somebody to cultivate my faith. Right. Like, I have to be doing that daily, or I'm going to burn out. And I'm not going to be able to do this, because it is too hard and it is too devastating. And then I think also, I mean, for Created, and again, like, I'm sure people who work with traumatized communities can attest this, secondhand trauma is very real. Yes. So I've this past year and a half, I've really been dealing with like a lot of really negative effects from secondhand trauma. Just after hearing story after story of these like egregious abuses and things that happen. And so I'm currently in therapy, which is great. Okay. I highly recommend therapy. I love therapy. But it's for secondhand trauma, because I think for it manifests itself in so many ways. And for me, it's like really intrusive thoughts that like these stories I hear just like replay in my mind. And so it's hard. And I think only through like continuing to cultivate faith, but then also practicing self-care, can you continue? Like, I see, and even on my staff team, like, we see so many people burn out or not be able to do it, because it's like, you have to build those things in. And it's hard. So I'm like, this work is hard. And I mean, spiritually it's hard, you know? So, I think, created has probably brought me to like the darkest places in my life. But at the same time, there's still so much hope there.
Yeah.
So it's like, I do think also I'm like learning to find hope in the midst of it all is like probably the biggest spiritual lesson that created's taught me. Yeah. And still teaching me because it's still hard.
It sounds so depressing in one way. It's like, in the darkest times, how do you find hope? That's what it's taught me. It's like, wait a minute.
It's pretty hard.
It's pretty hard.
Yeah, it's there.
It's actually very, very hard.
Well, and I think at the same time, it's like, while it is so dark and it is so hard, like I get to daily look at so many stories of resilience that it's like, okay, if this woman can still function after like what's happened to her, like I can do this. Like, sure. I can keep going,
Yeah, I've actually been, thrust back into the director role over TI, which I had stepped out of for a few years. And, due to things, the way they happen in recovery, sometimes people need to kind of step back. So I'm stepping back in. And it's been pretty interesting because it's been such a long time since I've been in that actual role of discipling people and leading and dealing with issues as they come up and things like that. And recognizing the growth in myself where, you step away for a few years and come back and you're like, oh, wait, I actually know what I'm talking about now. Yeah. Where I probably didn't before, but I've learned over the last 14 years of ministry certain things about the darkest moments and how to care for yourself and how to continue on even though, everything in you wants to stop.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to do. And I've actually been discipling my friend Cole that's actually here with us. And I just keep telling him, I'm like, if you don't get your own solid personal, relationship with Jesus, your own spiritual practices, this will eat you up.
Yeah,
you won't make it.
Well, and it's like, if you're doing it, like I've learned, and there have been times directing created where like I am like functioning fully out of self.
Yeah.
Like, and I crash so hard and I become so hopeless. Like, if you're trying to function out of like, I can do it, like out of myself and not just like turning to God and at least trying to get refilled, like it's impossible.
Yeah.
To like stay the course, you know? And so I think that's such a huge lesson of like, yeah, it's impossible unless you're cultivating that. Yeah.
Yeah, you cannot continue. It's ironic. So Julie, my wife, just won an award for endurance and leadership this past weekend. And so that was just really amazing. And she totally deserves it. She's totally hardcore and doing amazing things. But it brought back the, this memory of mine where I actually won the award like back in 2013. And two things occurred to me. One, wow, I'm still going. That's kind of crazy. But then the reality is I almost wasn't.
Yeah.
I crashed the year after I got the award for endurance. And I almost think the award triggered the endurance crash because I was like, I don't deserve this.
Yeah.
And that is when like all of a sudden everything seemed bleak. I was 5 years in ministry at that point and the whole world around me just collapsed. I'm like, none of this makes sense. Nothing, I don't know where God is. I can't find God anywhere. We have, no resources, no nothing. And I wanted to walk away from everything. And that's when I entered therapy.
Yeah.
And entered, for the first time going into inner healing and learning about trauma and learning about my own brokenness and how for 5 years out of self, I did this.
Yeah.
And that was great, but I can't do it anymore. So God's like, you either let me in or this is over. Because for so long, just out of the flesh, when you're trying to run, when ministry is the result of a coping mechanism of something you're trying to hide, you can go for a while. And if you're somebody that can excel, you can excel for a while. But if you're only doing ministry because you are running from your own brokenness that hasn't been healed, you will crash.
Yeah.
And you will not represent Jesus in the way that he's worthy of being represented. And you and I have seen that through all the, how many people you and I have seen fail or fall away.
Yeah.
in the years that we've been doing this, just, from the underground and people that we know where ministries they're no longer.
Yeah.
And some people are no longer following Jesus. And you have to wonder, like, how much of that was because they operated out of self for so long, and eventually they just couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Me neither.
Me neither. So, How is your family?
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me about the husband, kids.
Yes, I have a husband. His name is Paul, and he's a social worker. He works with children in foster care, so it's also very hard.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, that's actually known as one of the hardest.
Yeah, it's very hard. And he's actually been there for over 10 years now. Wow. So that's a pretty longevity in that field. And then we have 3 kids. So we have 2 boys and a girl. They're 7, 4, and 2. And so, yes. So yeah, they're great. Yeah, my husband and I, people always ask us, they're like, so you guys both picked jobs that are really, and we're like, yeah, I don't think we planned that out. It just happened. But he's passionate about that too. And I think, again, too, like with like what we're talking about, like with the work that we're doing, the reality is like, as long as God keeps like cultivating that passion in you, like you can sustain, but you have to keep going back for that.
Yeah,
because that has to be there, or it's not gonna. You're not gonna enjoy the work you're doing. Yeah,
and I think you should. Yeah. You definitely should enjoy what you do. I mean, it's hard when you're dealing with people that are, Yeah,
it's not always fun, but
but you should feel fulfillment. Out of what you're doing, or you're not going to do it wrong.
Joy. Yeah.
I always think of your husband. And I always think of when that tree fell on his car. That is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I just got to tell you, I wish I had a picture and could show it in the video, but
I have one, I think.
It literally, his car, a huge tree that was like, you couldn't even fit your arms around.
And nothing happened. The tree just fell.
Fell squarely on top of his car and squished it like you'd see in a cartoon, and it just sat there for days. And I was like, man, Paul,
while we waited for insurance. Just sat there.
I'm like, that's real. I don't think you can drive that away.
That was so bad. Oh my gosh, yes.
So, any plans you and Paul like dream about for your future?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think, well, for us, I think right now, I think most of our dreams are really more centered on like, what do we want to cultivate for our kids, and like, how are we, like even thinking through like, what does, like we talked about, like what does church look like for our family, right? And how do we want to make sure that our kids are getting some of that, and what does that? So I think that, and I think too, I think where we live, we're in East Tampa. We in our neighborhood just trying to figure out like, okay, we want to stay here. How do we cultivate like being good neighbors? How do we? And so I think most of our dreams, I think because both of our jobs or both of our ministry is like so taxing and so hard, it's like, how do we make our neighborhood and like where we come home to feel like a oasis in the midst of it? And that includes like, creating good relationships with the people around us. Like we love in like the little area that we're in, like all of our neighbors are these older families that have been there for like generations, and so like we're like the only young couple like in the area, and so like just kind of cultivating relationships with them and making sure that like they know that we're there to help when they need it. And so I feel like a lot of our dreams kind of center on about like, okay, how do we make this feel like that, and how do we make that true for our kids too? Because I think the hardest thing, and you mentioned like being a workaholic in the beginning, and like that is such a fear for me, and also something that I have done where it's like, and I think part of it is like the goal oriented person that I am. Like when things are going crazy or created, I just like put everything into it,
right? And
that's a sacrifice for my family. And so trying to figure out that, and I hate the word balance, but that's the only thing I think of right now. But it's like, okay, how do I not do that so that I'm also cultivating this? And so most of our dreams kind of center around that. Like, honestly, I feel like because both of us have been in this work and like struggling with people for so long, it's like our dreams that we come to together are like, okay, how do we refresh, and how do we like but how do we not put the stress of our work on our children? And so that's pretty much what we talk about.
Just so you know, that's trauma for your children.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And so it's like, and that's something like, so we both come from, both of our parents were pastors.
Yeah.
And so we come from that, I guess, and I mean, my mom wouldn't mind me saying this, but it's like when we were growing up, like I spent almost every evening at the church. We did our for me, I won't speak of Paul's parents, but for me, like we did my mom's work with her in a way. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways that did create that place in me where it's like, I want to make sure that like I'm not doing that. Like I don't want, and then she also had to travel a lot for work. And so that's something that's like, I feel like right now where we're at in life, like a lot of our dreams around like spirituality and like ministry together is like really trying to focus in because our work is so hard.
Right.
And again, I mean, hard is relative, but it's just like, we're dealing with difficult subjects on a daily basis, and that can make you so burnt out by the time you get home. So I feel like most of our dreams are centering around like, how do we like deal with that personally and then cultivate and try not to traumatize our kids, which I mean, they're going to be, I'm sure they'll all go into counseling. They're going to be traumatized. Yeah. And then I think for us too, I mean, I think in the future, we dream of, I mentioned like he's in the foster care work, and we've always had a dream of like once our kids are grown and out of the house, like fostering teenagers, because in his work, well, in Hillsborough County, if you're not aware, they have the most removals in the state of like children that are removed on a daily basis and put into foster care, which that also speaks to a lot of things. But and there's not enough beds for the amount of children that are in foster care. So like they have children that go night to night, which means they get put in a different home every night. And it's just if people are willing to put them in. And so as part of his job, when he's on call, he can't like go to bed until every child from their agency is put in a bed that night.
Really?
And so he'll be up till like 3 o'clock in the morning. So that means these kids are sitting in the office until 3 o'clock in the morning until they finally get a bed, and then they can go to that bed because there's just not enough beds. And a lot of those are teenagers that are difficult to deal with and struggle. And so he's always been really passionate about the teenage population. And when he first started, he's now one of the assistant directors, but when he first started as a case manager, he always got the teenage boys because he was one of the only males on the staff. And so they would give him all the teenage boys. And so he's always been really passionate about that. So that's one of our dreams too, is like in the future, like we would be totally open to like taking teenagers in and planning for that. But it's like we want to give the space for our children to like grow. Our house isn't big enough to fit more kids than we have. But and yeah, so I think that's one of our dreams, like in the future, and like how, like maybe in a way that we would want to like do ministry together. Cause yeah, that's a passion of his. And then, I mean, our oldest 2 boys are adopted, and they, it actually, the short version of the story, I won't tell the whole story, but, their father was actually the first case that Paul was ever given as a caseworker. Yeah. And so that's kind of where that passion kind of started with him, of just, cause in that situation, they just had a really good relationship, and Paul became like the safe person when he would go to jail or when something would happen. He would call and be like, "Hey, I need help." And we actually, our oldest son, when he was born, we used to take like Pampers and bottles and stuff over to him and his mother, his birth mom. And so yeah, it was just like a crazy chain of events. So the way that they came to live with us is they called and asked us to take care of them. The parents called and asked us. And so, yeah, so that's always just something that's like we're still passionate about. And even before that happened, like we had always thought eventually we would foster children. We didn't expect to do it at that moment. But, we thought eventually that we would. And so that's something that we still dream about.
That's pretty awesome. So if anybody is keeping score, so Tampa, our wonderful home city, has the most strip clubs, the most people that are being trafficked or something, right? No beds for teenage people in the foster care system. And last week we found out that it is 3 people a day die of opioid overdose in Hillsborough County alone. 3 people a day die in Hillsborough County alone. It's 50 times higher than the national average. 50 times. So Hillsborough, you got some stuff going on that people really need to do something about. There's plenty of opportunity to make things better and stop making things worse, right? So any parting words as we kind of get ready to wrap up? Anything you want people to know or to do or...
Well, I guess what people know, people ask me that a lot about like when, especially with hearing about the work of Created and just human trafficking in Tampa, the biggest question is always like, what do we do? Like, how do we combat that? So, I mean, people can always check out our website to figure out how they can get involved, which is createdwomen.com. But I think it really, to me, I think the biggest thing that people can do, unless you actually feel called to that work, is just like continue telling the story of the fact that this is true and this is happening. So it's like educate yourself. Like everything we've talked about, it's like educate yourself and then tell the story, because that's what changes perception and that's what changes like the thought processes of other people. So I always say that's the biggest thing you can do to help combat human trafficking is tell the story and tell the facts of like what's happening. That's the only way that we create change, because still to this day, even though yes, in the church there's been a huge anti-trafficking movement, that's not necessarily true of everywhere, and it's still there. We still so commonly have people who like just can't believe it. Yeah, and so the only way that it changes is telling the story.
I think I think people choose to, speaking of choice, I do think people choose to believe the story that gives them an out.
Yeah.
And so, it's such as, when in the political environment, everybody's saying all the drugs are coming across the Mexican border and we need to build a wall. Meanwhile, it's like, no, the doctors in America prescribe plenty enough pills to kill our people. Yeah. So the drugs in this country are homegrown and they're given out by professionals, but nobody wants to turn and look at that. It's the believability that, people make this choice to become addicts and be homeless and go into prostitution. It's just all that is a way that people can sleep at night and not have to worry about things. Yeah. Instead of doing the opposite, which would be to educate themselves and to recognize, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just the individual's problem. This is a societal problem. Yeah. And until we create a different society, then people are going to continue to be broken, lost, and, and in harm's way, So, well, Jillian, I have always loved being your friend and walking alongside you in ministry, and it's been amazing just to sit here and share you with the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
So everybody check out createdwomen.com and learn more about what you can do to make a difference. And if you don't, we will hunt you down and hurt you. Have a great day. Peace.